Not long ago, it looked like DeRozan and the Spurs were in a tough situation. The team was coming off its first season without a playoff appearance since 1997, and the former All-Star seemed to be one of the reasons why they were getting behind in the West. So as the offseason came and went by, many people assumed it was only a matter of time before he had to pack his bags. But nothing could have been further from the truth. As soon as the new season started, the Spurs proved they were ready to make some noise once again. And against all odds, DeRozan was right at the center of San Antonio's rebirth. But despite his revival, some people believe the team would be better by selling him now that his value has increased, especially considering he's in an expiring contract. Multiple contenders could use his scoring and playmaking ability, and by moving him, the Spurs could finally hand the keys over to their next generation of players. However, there are multiple reasons why the team shouldn't even think about trading their current leader. And today, we'll give each of them a proper look. As we all know, DeRozan's marriage with the Spurs didn't have what we would call an excellent start. Back then, the shooting guard was happily living in Toronto as the franchise player of the Raptors. And despite being criticized for his inability to take the team to a championship, he had been led to believe he would remain with the team for a long time. On the Spurs side, things weren't going so well. They were coming off of their most tumultuous season since the 90s, and no one could tell what were the exact reasons behind their struggles. Former franchise player Kawhi Leonard missed most of his last season in San Antonio because of injury, and without him, the team fell out of championship contention. However, that wasn't even the worst. Neither the team nor Kawhi's representation explained what happened with their relationship, but at some point during Leonard's recovery, tensions started to grow between the two parts. And once the season was over, numerous rumors indicated that Kawhi had requested the trade. So, suddenly, the Spurs were in a situation they hadn't faced in the Popovich era. The player that was supposed to become Tim Duncan's successor wanted to be traded, but a season filled with questions about his health and professionalism had diminished his value. In other words, the team was going to have a hard time finding a great offer for Leonard. But since there were no other options available, they'd have to take what other teams would offer. However, they were lucky enough to find a Raptors team that was trying to make a final push before giving into the temptation of hitting the rebuild button. Before long, both teams reached an agreement. Leonard would be sent to Toronto along with Danny Green in exchange for DeRozan, Jakob Poeltl, and a future draft pick. The deal worked to perfection for the Raptors. Leonard made a successful comeback and led the team to its first championship, while also proving all his doubters wrong and claiming his second Finals MVP. But things were much different for the Spurs. Along with Kawhi, they missed the remaining members of their big three, and while DeMar's scoring ability was never in question, his overall contributions to the team were not as impactful as Leonard's were. His fit with LaMarcus Aldridge was also the source of a lot of questions, and once everything was said and done, San Antonio was eliminated in the first round by the Golden State Warriors, making it the first time they suffered back-to-back first-round eliminations since the early 90s. At that point, more questions began surrounding the team. While Aldridge and DeRozan were talented enough to lead them to the playoffs, it was evident they were not good enough to take the Spurs beyond the first round in the ultra-competitive West. However, it wasn't clear whether they had any other options available. They hadn't been through a rebuild since Popovich took over the team, and even if they decided to go through that route, their young players still had to prove they could form a winning core. So in the end, they decided to give it another shot with the current roster and system despite the numerous questions. However, the results were worse than anyone could have expected. Despite bringing most of the roster back, the team was unable to perform at the same level they did the season before. A slow start took them out of the playoffs race during most of the seasons, and while they managed to make a strong push inside of the bubble, they failed to keep their 22-year playoff streak alive. However, not everything was bad news. After realizing their postseason hopes were all but over, Popovich decided to use the seeding games as an opportunity to help the young players develop the games. And the results were a pleasant surprise for the team. They didn't exactly dominate the competition, but they looked revitalized. And with DeRozan paving the way for the youngsters, it seemed like the bubble was an experience that would allow the team to start making a transition towards the future. When DeMar announced he would exercise his player option and return to San Antonio for another season, it wasn't clear what his role within the team's offense would be. With the way his teammates performed inside the bubble, there was no need for him to keep playing a ball-dominant style. But given he had basically played like that for his entire career, no one could tell whether he could provide anything other than scoring. And if he didn't, would he at least be capable of becoming a more efficient scorer? Most of those questions were nothing new to him. During his time in Toronto, people always wondered whether he could become a multi-dimensional threat, and even more so after each of his collapses during the playoffs. But to most people's surprise, DeMar came out of the gates playing at a level he had never enjoyed before in his career, and the Spurs immediately benefited from his improved version of their best player. By having a glimpse at his numbers, you'll immediately notice two differences from his career averages. First, that he's scoring slightly less than in previous years, and second, that he's making a career-high 6.9 assists per game. But what do those numbers mean, and why are they so important to the team? Well, let's start with his scoring. At first, you may assume the fact he's averaging the least points since 2013 is because he's starting to slow down or because Popovich has reduced his role within the offense. but none of those conclusions are true. As a matter of fact, the shooting guard is still leading the team in scoring. However, he's changed things a little bit to adapt to the Spurs' way. It's no secret Popovich has always emphasized ball movement as part of his strategies. He always makes sure to get everyone involved within the offense, and this year has been no exception. However, he's decided to change the role of some of his players this time around. While everyone still gets a chance to shine, the veterans have taken a step back to allow youngsters to assume a bigger responsibility on offense. So while Aldridge and Patty Mills were the team's second and third leading scorers last season, it's now DeJounte Murray and Keldon Johnson who are occupying those roles. Of course, things are different with DeMar since he's still the Spurs' most talented player and most versatile scorer. However, instead of focusing on making shots throughout the game, he's being more selective, and most importantly, he's saving his best for the fourth quarter. After all, San Antonio's been one of the teams that have had the most games come down to the clutch, and also one of the most successful in those situations. A lot of that success has come by DeRozan's hand, as he's currently among the league leaders in scoring in the clutch. More often than not, his contributions have been key to help the team win those games. So while he's still capable of torching defenses during all four quarters, his most valuable contributions from a scoring standpoint come late in the fourth quarter, as he takes on the role of closer to make sure the Spurs get as many wins as possible. And even though he's not turned into Steph Curry, he's taking almost 4 times as many threes as he did during last season. Popovich has finally allowed him to expand his range, and he's also done his part by becoming smarter with his shot selection. However, if you ask his teammates, they might tell you his biggest contribution is not his scoring. If there's a reason why everyone's involved within the offense, that's because the Spurs have some excellent passers. And believe it or not, DeMar is by far the best among them. His playmaking is the best of his career, and the reason why he doesn't need to worry so much about making points through the early portions of games is that he's now shifted his focus to creating plays for his teammates. He won't necessarily make the kind of passes that are featured on a highlight reel, but if you see him play, you'll immediately notice that his instincts as a passer are much improved from his days as a Raptor. Now he's capable of reading defenses more efficiently, and as a result, he's setting up his teammates to be more successful. And while such an increase in volume would usually come accompanied by an increase in turnovers, the truth is he's averaging the least turnovers per game since his rookie year. So even though almost a third of the team's made baskets have been the result of one of his passes, he's made sure to take care of the ball better than ever. In other words, despite his usage and scoring being down, DeMar is playing arguably the best basketball of his career. Thanks to his improvements, the Spurs are back in the playoffs mix and is not looking like they'll slow down anytime soon. That may even help him make a return to the All-Star game this season. But in case it doesn't, we're confident it's more than enough to guarantee the team will not even consider the idea of moving him away anytime soon. Altogether, we can safely conclude DeRozan is one of the main reasons why San Antonio should make it back to the postseason this year. His evolution as a player is something that deserves recognition. He's no longer the guy that has a bad contract and takes too many bad shots, but the one who makes his team better with his contributions. He's embraced his role as the kind of leader who can push his teammates to the next level. And even if the Spurs don't make it out of the first round, the young players will benefit from his teachings. And that may be the biggest win they can get this season. But now, what are your thoughts about this Spurs team? Do you believe they could surprise a few contenders come playoff time? Let us know in the comments. We hope you've enjoyed today's video, and if you did, remember to like it and subscribe to our channel for more NBA content. We are Courtside.